Good morning, and thank you for coming out to stand up and speak out. I'm honored to be included in your list of speakers. I'm especially honored to be on the same podium as Derek Sloan. We have one thing in common. We've both been kicked out of the Conservative Party. I was notified by email, and I have it framed hanging on the wall right beside my Community Hero Award, which I got from the Conservative Party only a month earlier.
I'm very pleased to be with you today because we are sharing the same principles. And as a father of two daughters, 22 years old and 19 years old, I cannot understand what is happening in our country here.
Is when I was speaking with Evan Solomon on CTV, and he asked me what I thought about Bill C-16. And I said, well, I would repeal that bill.
Thank you. All right, another round of applause for Derek Sloan. There is a providential situation that is going to allow our next guest to be able to share some pretty explosive truth about what's going on in our province. Because the media will not report on what is truly going on, for some of you, you may know what this next speaker is going to be talking about. For many of you, it may be completely new. But there is a medical scandal of horrendous proportions going on in BC right now. And I'm so thankful for the advocacy, the tireless advocacy of Jenn Smith on these issues. So, Jenn, you're up.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you to everybody for coming out. For those of you who don't know who I am, as you just heard, my name is Jenn Smith, and I won't get too close to that speaker. I'm a transgender activist, but I am perhaps not the type of transgender activist that you're used to, okay? My activism over the years has been to try to raise awareness to what is going on with our most vulnerable children in terms of transgender identity, and there goes my notes. In the sense that I am opposed to the medical and pharmaceutical transitioning of children. And also some of the programs in the schools that I believe facilitate that. And there are good reasons for opposing that. So things such as Lupron and the synthetic hormones that they give these kids have permanent, irreversible consequences, including permanent sterility. And I think that everybody should be very concerned about what is going on. And I'm going to give you some statistics here today that should alarm everybody and make it clear as to why I have been working for 4 years now to try to raise awareness on this issue. And for 2 years I've been trying to get provincial and national inquiries, and Derek Sloan, who was just up on the stage, helped me get it into the Parliament in December, I think it was. Unfortunately, it was ignored, but I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep on going. I believe that children are not old enough and mature enough to understand the serious, irreversible consequences of going on to these medications, and I believe that what the courts regarded as a kind of sin for the father in the AB versus CD case to try to prevent his daughter from going on to testosterone, that was actually the proper thing to do. Yes. Now I'm going to give you some stats in a second here, but before I do, as Paul just mentioned, there's a very strange thing happening here today. And I don't mean me. I mean, I am strange, but that's not the strange thing that's happening. There is a very strange event happening right now where I stand. As I stand right now, I am the only person in British Columbia who is legally allowed to connect the name of the doctor who is involved in the ABVCD case to some of these things that I'm going to be telling you about. I was brought into the court about a year ago on accusations of having violated the publication ban myself, and at that time I submitted an application to have the publication ban on the doctors removed. What happened was that while the judge found that my arguments had merit, he didn't want to give anybody carte blanche to name these doctors, but he did carve out a provision allowing me to be able to name this doctor in relationship to this case, but only in front of live audiences, which is what we have here today. Okay, but there are some conditions, so I want everybody to be aware that the Supreme Court has made it clear that when I say the name of the doctor, you are not allowed to stream that to the web. You're not allowed to record that. You're not allowed to repeat that anywhere outside of this circle. That is a legal requirement because he is protected from being named everywhere except for by me here now. So when I say the name of the doctor, I'm just going to ask everybody to briefly turn off their recording devices in order to help me comply with the court orders. Children specifically are falling for this. So the first number I'm going to give you an idea of what is happening, and there's lots of studies in this regard that are out there, but just to cite one study that showed that, and they looked at a large group of transgender youths, and they found that 52% of those youths had one or more DSM-listed psychiatric conditions in addition to gender dysphoria, so believing that they're transgender. So 52%, one or more other psychiatric conditions. Now, the other side of this debate will frequently explain that away by saying that the reason they have these psychological and emotional conditions is because they're bullied and they don't fit in and people don't accept them. So what we need to do is we need to implement programs like SOGI 123 to make society more accepting of them, and that will solve the problem. The problem is that doesn't work because there are some other demographics at work here that, in my opinion, prove that we are targeting our most vulnerable children. I'm just going to look at two examples. The first one is autism. So the studies on this are fairly extensive. Depends on which study you look at, but the studies vary and show that between 8% and as high as 54% of the transgender youths that they looked at were on the autism spectrum. Now, the doctor that I'm going to be naming here in a bit, who is the preeminent gender specialist and psychologist in British Columbia, he himself has admitted that 20% of his child patients are on the autism spectrum. 20%. I usually say it's about 30, so let's say it's somewhere between what he says and I say, and that's 25%. That number doesn't become alarming until you realize what the prevalence of autism is in the general population, which according to the CDC is 1.7%. For 25% of transgender youths to be on the autism spectrum is alarming. And that is way out of whack. There's nobody out there who would suggest that being transgender causes autism. So this supports my thesis that this is very vulnerable children who are falling for this ideology and going on to these drugs and becoming lifelong pharmaceutical customers and being sterilized in the process. Now, this whole debate became very personal for me a little while ago when the doctor who I'm going to be naming gave a talk at the Vancouver, I believe it was Vancouver Public Library. And people should know about me that I was a foster child in British Columbia. I used to be a ward of the province of British Columbia. I went through multiple different homes as a child. So I was, thanks to a secret recording that was done by Culture Guard and Carrie Simpson, given a copy of this talk that this doctor gave at the library. And one statistic that he mentioned in there that stood out to me and alarmed me and made this extremely personal for me was that he said of his 1,000 child patients, half of them, 500, were from the Ministry of Child and Family Development. Half. Now, I have tried to talk to this doctor personally about this, and I have talked to the doctor's lawyers, and they said, well, he's got a special relationship with the Ministry of Child and Family Development, so that's not anything particularly surprising. So, I mean, when I say that, by the way, what we're talking about are foster kids like I was, and kids in unstable housing situations, and kids otherwise in the care of the government. The thing is that if you take that 500 number, and I did some number crunching on that, at the time that that number was released, the province of BC had about somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 kids in their care. So when I did the math, I found out that 7.7% of all children in government care were identifying as transgender and under the care of one doctor. 7.7% of all children in care, if the numbers that he has released are correct. Now that's just one doctor. There are other doctors out there. The number may be as high as 1 in 10. Compare that to the regular population for transgender, which is estimated to be about 1 in 200. That is startling. And this is one of the reasons I've been calling for provincial and national inquiries on this immediately, because these are extraordinarily vulnerable kids who are being preyed upon. Now this doctor who has been involved in this was also involved in the AB versus CD case. He was the doctor, he was the psychologist that dealt with the girl and ultimately ended up recommending the girl for testosterone therapy, which led to his whole chain of events that has resulted in the father now being put in jail. So I'm going to name this doctor. Some of you are going to know what the name of this doctor is, but I'm going to need you for just 1 moment to stop streaming, please. So now I'm just winging it. But what I also want to say is I'm not an agent of division. I do not want to promote animosity. I am transgender myself. I've been bisexual myself. I do not want anger. I do not want division. I do not want hatred. I want to be friends with this community. They have not led me to this point. They have found me guilty of wrong speak and essentially kicked me out of the community, but I don't have any ill feelings towards them. What I want is provincial and national inquiries, because I believe our most vulnerable kids are being preyed upon by the pharmaceutical industry. Thank you very much. Okay, and by the way, you're not allowed to, if you got the name on recording or something, you're not allowed to put that onto the web, you're not allowed to write about it until we get the publication ban fully removed. It can only be said in a public setting like this.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jen. Can I have a round of applause? One of the bravest people I know. Next, we want to have, speaking of brave people, it's interesting that